The champs are in town, so I'll chat with Armando Velez from Locked On Panthers.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks and Locked On Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, got to let you all know that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. If you're not already a member, be sure to go and check out FanDuel.com right now, and you'll have the chance to win $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet cashes with America's #1 sportsbook. All right, with the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers coming to town to take on the Chicago Blackhawks Thursday night at the United Center, thought it would be a perfect time to have a crossover episode with none other than Armando Velez from Locked On Panthers. Armando, always fun when we get together for a little chat. Unfortunately, only happens 2 times a year when these two teams face off with one another, but excited to have you back on for a conversation. How you doing on this fine Wednesday evening?
Yeah, doing well, my friend. Grateful to be chatting with you on the record, as not only do we talk a lot about hockey, we do talk a lot about golf as well. So glad to have also a golfing buddy to chat all types of sports with. We need more golf conversation, at least off the record, between our Locked On hosts for sure.
Well, I can certainly take you up on that, as it'll be an exciting PGA Tour season rolling around once 2025 hits one final golf event to conclude 2024 here this week. But we're not talking about golf on today's episode, Mondo. We're talking about hockey. We're going to start off with what's been going down with the defending Stanley Cup champions, as I'm sure lots of my viewers and listeners are pretty sick of hearing the frustrations that continue to plague the Chicago Blackhawks team. We will get to Blackhawks talk during segment 2. But first things first, I got to ask, how is life as the defending Stanley Cup champions? And not only that, Mondo, but Florida has gotten off to a really good start here thus far, showing no signs of that notorious Stanley Cup hangovers. They're 12-6-1 through their opening 19 games this year. Kind of give me the vibes around this Panthers team right now and how impressive it is that they've gotten off to this start.
It's business as usual for this team, and it really started off with just opening night. I mean, the fans were really hyped up with the banner raising ceremony, but it was quick. They just got the cup out, put it on the stand, put their arms together, looked at the banner go up, and it was right back to Florida Panthers hockey. They didn't waste time just admiring it. They had all summer to celebrate, and then a dominant performance against the Boston Bruins in night number 1 for their win, and then of course defeating them a week later. It's crazy to think that where the Boston Bruins have fallen over these last few weeks, with unfortunately the firing of Jim Montgomery. But for the Panthers, I mean, in the middle of that, a 7-game winning streak that spanned from from a trip to New York, then going to Finland for the Global Series, and then 2 more back at home. And then, a little bit of a stretch here for the Florida Panthers, dropping 6 out of the possible 8 points for them. I mean, but hey, they're 3-2-0 after losses this season. I mean, but incredible starts from the likes of Sam Bennett in a contract year for him. Sam Reinhart, 14 goals, who is second in the NHL in goals, right behind Alexander Ovechkin, who's currently not playing right now for the Washington Capitals. But I mean, it's really just continuing to go through the motions, and really other guys have just stepped up in when they've lost so much. I mean, there's still a little bit to figure out as who's going to be that staple on power play 1 for the Panthers, but Uvis Balinskis, who played a little bit for the Panthers last year, gets that top power play role for the Panthers currently, after former Blackhawk Adam Boqvist originally had it at the beginning of the season after getting hit with the puck in the face on opening night, and then kind of losing his spot due to the injury after missing just 1 game. But still, I mean, for the Panthers, I mean, it's been just rolling along for this, even though they've stubbed their toe for a little bit in this current stretch.
I definitely got to ask about Sam Reinhart, a man that you just mentioned, currently inside the top 5 in the NHL in points this year, right there in the race for the Rocket Richard with the man that you mentioned, Alexander Ovechkin. Hopefully, we'll see Ovi back on the ice sometime soon, chasing down that Gretzky record here this season. But for Reinhart to go in get off to the start that he has this year after signing that massive extension to stay with the Florida Panthers. I think that's got to be huge for not only Sam Reinhart to have that belief that he is one of the best goal scorers in the league, which I'm sure he already had, but to go and do it again, I think is such a pivotal thing. What have you seen out of Sam Reinhart, and just also your thoughts on that 9-year extension that he signed that I believe is going to keep him with the Panthers until 2031, 32, if I'm correct?
2032 for him, just a few years after Barkov's contract. And the thing is, he's doing it on both ends of the ice. Him and Barkov are the two best defensive players for the Panthers. If after Etu and the likes of Lundell, Jesper Boqvist get their chances on the penalty kill, the Alexander Barkov and Sam Reinhart, they're paired together on that side of the ice too for them. So it's really both sides for Sam Reinhart, but just getting to the net front for them and just doing it from his office, even on the power play for him. So it's just really continuing on for what he's doing in his position. And I mean, hey, teams haven't found a way to stop him from the middle of the offensive zone for the Panthers. I mean, and this is all happening with their 12-6-1 record, and it's going on with Carter Verhaeghe at the moment shooting 5.8%, which for his Panthers career shooting percentage is 14.1. So he's shooting 9% lower for him. Matthew Tkachuk has been up and down at times. He's been a little careless with the puck in the neutral zone, which has caused some rushes the other way. But the thing is, the fact that Sam Reinhart has picked up on the scoring, he's on an 11-game point streak right now. Barkov is on a 9-game point streak. So those guys have continued to carry when other guys have been down. So whenever Sam Reinhart and Alexander Barkov might have a little bit of a slump, maybe the likes of Matthew Tkachuk and Carter Verhaeghe will pick up some of that slack.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing that I noticed when researching this Florida Panthers team through their opening 19 games is the sheer amount of depth that they have producing for them right now. One thing that stood out to me, not a lackadaisical start by any means, but Matthew Tkachuk under a point per game. But the Panthers have 8 players who are already in double figures in terms of points right now. That depth, to me, from an outsider, is what I feel like is going to give fans the confidence that this team has another run in them. And also, it kind of gives you that belief that I believe the Panthers are 6th in the NHL in goals per game right now. They're still having that elite type of offensive output when you mentioned a guy like Carter Verhaeghe, who is a big-time goal scorer for them, isn't getting the job done in that department. Matthew Tkachuk has been a little bit slow out of the gates. Does that instill even more confidence that this team still has enough firepower that when guys are down, they can just pick each other up and someone else can go and have a great game to get this team 2 points?
Yeah, and the thing is, when the Panthers have three centers through their top 3 lines who can match up against a lot of the opposition. I mean, Anton Lundell, he's also another guy who signed an extension, a 6-year deal for him at $5 million a year. He's been able to go up into the lineup when guys have missed some time, like Alexander Barkov, just at the beginning of the season after going out of the game in the second game of the season against Ottawa. He missed 8 games after that, and Anton Lundell has stepped up for them. So it's really, even though Lundell isn't the biggest point producer for the Panthers, he's definitely ridden the ship for them for the Panthers. And Carter Verhaeghe, I just looked at his plus minus. He's minus 10 right now. So you're bound to see possibly a turnaround for him on just really this early struggle for him, as he's been a little snake bitten. And I actually did a little bit of a deep dive on just the how unlucky he's been, and the analytics have shown a little bit of how unlucky he's been, and also the fact that so many other guys can shift up and down, like an Evan Rodriguez. He can go on the top line. He could go on the third. He can go anywhere in the top 9. So that's also been beneficial for, even though guys have been in and out with injuries. And Thomas Nosek, who's the Kevin Stanley replacement, he just recently came back for the Global Series. They're still trying to figure things out there, even though the 4th line has had a little bit of a good stretch recently, even in the losses.
Wanted to ask about the defensive side of things as well, because again, from an outsider perspective, it looks like that's kind of the area where the Panthers have struggled the most this year. 21st in the NHL currently in goals against per game. And then I also noticed neither Sergei Bobrovsky nor Spencer Knight have a save percentage above 900 at this point in time. Can you kind of dissect the defensive, I don't want to call it struggles with a 12-6-1 team, but just kind of the defensive side of things and what you've seen out of Bobrovsky and Spencer Knight in just a couple appearances for him and net so far this year?
Yeah, Spencer Knight is 32 and goal save above expected, while Sergei Bobrovsky is 50th at the point at this moment in time, and league average is right at 900. So just goes to show how elite offense is right now in the NHL. But yeah, it's really about the Panthers, and just the structure is they're still trying to figure themselves out there. I mean, Dmitry Kulikov, even though he hasn't been terrible for the Panthers, he's playing up when he probably should be playing in a third pair role. So it's interesting to see what the Panthers are going to do later in as the trade deadline gets closer, on what they're going to do as far as bringing in a little bit of depth. They brought in Nate Schmidt in this offseason, as far as probably the next Oliver Ekman-Larsson is the guy who's going to get a 1-year deal and then possibly cash in on their next deal. He's playing on the third line on the third pair for the Panthers, and really for them, Uvis Balinskis as well. I mentioned him earlier on the power play. It's really, with how fast he skates, he's not really a defensive defenseman. He played a little bit of time at forward earlier in the year when the Panthers were a little depleted there. So there have been times where they've come up the ice. He's a little bit too far up, and then leaves his partner up to dry, which has allowed quite a few of the high danger chances against for them. At the beginning, it was some of the goals in garbage time for the Panthers, but really in recently, I mean, they're giving up 4 goals a game in the last 4, and it's crazy to think that they have a shutout in between all that as well. But still, the early goals against has just been backbreaker, and but the stats doesn't also say 3 shorthanded empty net goals for the opposition, that New Jersey had 1 and then Winnipeg had 2 just in their most recent matchup. So lots of goals against for them, but thankfully it's early for them, so they have time to figure that part out.
Last question I have for you, Mondo, before I turn things over to you, involves a pair of former Blackhawks that are playing on the Panthers' blue line. Gustav Forsling, who of course was a crucial part of that successful run throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs, and then Adam Boqvist as well, who has appeared in 9 of the opening 19 games for Florida. Boqvist, of course, a former top 10 selection for the Blackhawks in the NHL draft not that long ago. What has it been like for Gustav Forsling returning and being a key part of this blue line for the Panthers? How has he done so far this year? And then what have you seen from Adam Boqvist? Because when I saw the news that he signed with the Florida Panthers, I know that he had some struggles with the Columbus Blue Jackets, had some unfortunate injuries and whatnot that never kept him in the lineup consistently. I thought Florida was a really interesting place for a really good spot for him to go to in the next stage of his career on a 1-year type of contract, getting an opportunity with a team that has a lot of good vibes, a lot of experience, and from what it sounds like, an opening on their power play, which is kind of Adam Boqvist's bread and butter. So I thought it was a really good spot for him, and I'm sure there are many Blackhawks fans that have somewhat an interest to hear what he's been up to so far in his first year down in Sunrise.
Yeah, like I said, he lost his spot basically due to getting the hit in the face with a puck in the first game of the season, and then trying to get his way back. But Paul Maurice is one of those people who, if things are going right for his defense, he doesn't like to change it for them. So he's more willing to change the forward lines for them, which the Panthers have done so recently with putting Mackie Samoskevich in, who has 3 goals on the season for speed, or Jonah Gadjevich if they go up against a team that's very physical for them. So it's really, he hasn't played in quite a bit for the Panthers. So next time he's in, it's probably going to be an injury situation, or if the play of Uvis Balinskis continues to regress, because he's the power play quarterback right now. But there have been a lot of times where even on the man advantage that they've had a hard time keeping that puck in the zone. So maybe he will draw into the lineup. But Gustav Forsling, man, what a force he is on the end, where he's able to just skate back so naturally, even though he's not the tallest of guys, able to just get back and disrupt any scoring chances for them, and just able to reach the stick without committing a penalty. So just incredible what Gustav Forsling continues to do for the Panthers.
I know myself and a lot of other Blackhawks fans out there are very jealous in terms of the type of defenseman that Gustav Forsling is blossomed into being for the Panthers. And I think it just serves as a good reminder to us Blackhawks fans that not every every player's development is different. There is not a linear path for all of these defensemen. And we saw blips from Gustav Forsling when he was a 21-year-old here in Chicago. It was just kind of a tough situation in the organization. Joel Quenneville, notoriously not the best with young players, especially when it's a win now type of team. But I think it's just an important reminder for us Blackhawks fans to be patient with a lot of these prospects. Even if things aren't going good, there's still a lot of time. And again, not every development path is linear. Happy to see Gustav Forsling finding a lot of success. Happy for you, Armando, as a good buddy of mine that the Florida Panthers have gotten off to a good start here as defending Stanley Cup champions. Not going to be rooting for them on Thursday night, though, as they'll be taking on my Blackhawks. We'll return here in just a moment for segment 2 as I'll turn things over for Armando to ask some Blackhawks-related questions.
But first, we're going to tell you guys all about FanDuel and get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get 100 in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So just visit FanDuel to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets after you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
I also got to talk to you all real quick about Game Time. Hockey season, of course, has officially taken over, and it feels so good to get back down to the United Center, the backdrop that Mondo's got going on. And I'm sure many of you Blackhawks fans who are listening or viewing this right now feel the exact same way that I did before the start of the year, and that's why I got to talk to you all about Game Time. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events, not just hockey games, even easier. And I love how Game Time filters out the fluff, to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And I personally have used Game Time, not part of the ad read, since I was back in high school for probably about 10 years now, and I still use it to this day because it's the fastest, cheapest, and easiest way for you to purchase your tickets. Plus, I love how they provide views from every seat in the venue so you know exactly what to expect before you arrive and also before you make your purchase. I highly recommend you all go and download the Game Time app right now, and when you do, create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off with your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off with Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time.
Segment number 2 on this crossover edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and Locked On Chicago Blackhawks. Thank you once again for making both of our podcasts your first listen of the day. So, Jack, Chicago, losers of 5 of their last 6, their most recent win, an overtime win for them. But, I mean, crazy thing about what's going on recently with Chicago, is injuries galore that's going on right now with Laurent Brossoit, Seth Jones, Peter Mrazek is day-to-day, which maybe they said that he could possibly start on Thursday against the Florida Panthers. But then also recently, a healthy scratch. Tell us more about that, what's going on with the Chicago Blackhawks there.
Yeah, it is frustrating times right now for this Blackhawks team, a real struggling offense that doesn't really seem to have any sparks indicating that things are going to get better right here, right now. And you've mentioned the healthy scratchings. Not only did we see that with Taylor Hall on Saturday in Vancouver, and there was a little bit of a miscommunication between he and Luke Richardson, which is never a very good sign. But we've also seen that with Teuvo Teravainen early on so far this year. Philip Kurashev's been scratched. Lucas Reichel has been scratched as well. And while all of those players fully need to be better and need to be providing more to this Blackhawks team, it's the primary reason why they're dead last in the NHL in goals per game right now is because those key veterans in the forward group, guys who we're relying on to provide the productivity, they're not doing it right now. Tyler Bertuzzi hasn't been consistent. Teravainen has 2 points in his last 14 games. Taylor Hall only has 4 points so far this year, and it's forcing everything to get shifted on to 19-year-old forward Conor Bedard's shoulders. And unfortunately, this is the game of hockey and not basketball, and one player can't carry you to victory in the National Hockey League, especially when it's a young 19-year-old kid who every opposing team has circled on their whiteboard going into every single game. He's getting the toughest matchups. He's not getting a lot of help right now, and it's leading the Blackhawks down a dark path. And you mentioned the injuries that have been happening recently as well. Seth Jones is going to be out for at least 4 weeks, it seems, with a right foot injury. And I know there's a lot of discussion around Seth Jones's contract, but regardless of what you feel about him, there's no denying his impact on this Blackhawks team. First off, he's first in the NHL in time on ice so far this year. Secondly, the Blackhawks, I believe, are now 6-22-4 without Seth Jones in their lineup since he was acquired from the Columbus Blue Jackets. So that puts this team in a really tough spot. They're down their primary minute eater who can play in all situations. And then, yeah, you mentioned Peter Mrazek was not able to go in their last game last night against the Anaheim Ducks due to a personal matter. Does sound like he's going to be able to get the nod in between the pipes for the Hawks in this game against Florida, which is a little bit of good news. But yeah, not having Laurent Brossoit either, it felt like the Blackhawks were going to have a really strong tandem in net this year, which they still have quite honestly had. I need to give a hat tip to Arvid Soderblom, who put up some of the worst numbers of any goaltender in the NHL last year and has completely flipped the script. He has some of the best numbers of any goaltender in the NHL this year, despite losing 5 of his opening 6 starts. So yeah, it's just a tough spot for this Blackhawks team to be in right now, because you're not getting that production from the forwards. We're having kind of weird things happening behind the scenes. Luke Richardson's line combinations have been the weirdest thing I've ever seen, I think, in professional hockey. And then even today, we're hearing Teuvo Teravainen, who's supposed to be a veteran leader of this group, saying, he's losing confidence and it's just tough right now. It's a really, really, really dark spot for this Blackhawks team. And the unfortunate part about it, Mondo, is we knew this Blackhawks team wasn't going to be a playoff contender. We knew they didn't have legitimate aspirations or anything. But based on the moves that they made and bringing in some veterans, getting better defensively, I mentioned that goaltender tandem, I thought they were going to take a little bit of a step this year. Nothing ridiculous. I anticipated, as I mentioned in my Central Division crossover at the start of the year, I thought somewhere between 70 and 75 points for this Blackhawks team, but they're not even on pace to have 60 points right now. They're somehow worse offensively than they were last year. Conor Bard is struggling. It's truly from bad to worse right now for this Blackhawks team, Mondo.
Yeah, and you mentioned Conor Bard and getting all the assignments. I mean, two shots on goal or less in the last 5 games, and then before that, 3 shots or more in 9 of the 11 before that. So I mean, you think of it was very exciting for him to go back to Vancouver, his hometown, and to get that, and then a turnover that ended up in a goal in the back of their net for them in their visit there. And there was also talk about Conor Bedard being frustrated, but this isn't anything new for him, as he's been on teams that haven't won much. I mean, his junior team in Regina, it wasn't a successful team based on winning. So loyalty is truly something for Conor Bedard. So definitely something that's going to be for him. That's going to just be a little bit of patience necessary for the Chicago Blackhawks there. And also, it just goes to show, like you said, it's not linear. I feel like a lot of people expected Sid and McDavid in year number 2 to be Conor Bedard as well. I mean, there's also so many bridges here with Nick Foligno named as captain, which I remember texting you during the offseason how much I liked this move for the Hawks here, but also guys who are other bridges like Alec Martinez, a three-time Stanley Cup champion, right before Kevin Korchinski and Artem Levshunov play full-time there. And you mentioned Tyler Bertuzzi. I mean, he got a contract now after signing a 1-year deal in Toronto because of not knowing where the cap was going to be and going to be that thinking he was going to be a little bit of that mentor, but not off to a great start there. But you mentioned the line combinations for Luke Richardson, some of the best that I've seen, and based on Money Puck, Teravainen, Foligno, and Bedard. None of them are even on the same line together. They're all on 3 different lines separately. It looks like that Luke Richardson feels like that Kyle Davidson might be breathing down his neck. But I don't. But as a person of an outsider with no attachment to Chicago, I think this is kind of not necessarily where they were expected to be, but knowing that it was going to be another year of growing pains for them.
Yeah, it still ultimately was going to be a year all about the development and figuring out still what we have right here, right now, what future pieces we need. But I just think for no one to really look good right now is the problem, Armando. And we're seeing the frustrations out of Conor Bard, who, as you mentioned, isn't, this familiar with losing, but he's still a super competitive kid. And I know that game on Saturday in Vancouver meant a lot to him. And for him to really have a nothing burger offensively, and as you referenced, that tough play at the Canucks blue line that led to the empty net goal, it's just such a tough spot for him to be in right now. And one thing I will say about the forward lines is I think it's good to move Conor Bedard to the wing, because under Luke Richardson's system, there are a lot of defensive responsibilities that he puts on his center iceman, and that's just not Conor Bedard's forte, and that's never going to be his forte at the NHL level. He's not ever going to be that elite two-way type of player. We want him to get a little bit better on the defensive side of things, absolutely, but he's always going to be known for his offensive abilities, and moving him to the wing kind of allows him to be freed up and to do that a little bit. So I would continue to like to see him there, but it just feels like Luke Richardson has gotten so desperate in terms of getting results and finding something that'll work right here, right now. He's willing to try everything from period to period, and there hasn't been a lot of opportunities for players to establish chemistry with one another and figure out how they like to play and where they want the puck and kind of how they mesh and all that stuff. I think that's one part that has been a tough result of Luke Richardson kind of hitting the blender button here, and none of it has really worked for Conor Bedard. But that's the frustrating part about it, Mondo, is Conor Bedard gets wrapped into this struggle that the Blackhawks are having offensively as a team. And I'm getting even texts from some of my Blackhawks buddies. They're like, is Bedard, is he a bust? Is he not as good as he was? Stop.
Too early.
19 years old. Please tell me who on this Blackhawks offense is thriving right now, besides Ryan Donato, who suddenly who's suddenly the best goal scorer on the team. Who is thriving on this Blackhawks offense? It's nobody. Nobody is thriving right now. And these are a lot of respected veterans. Yeah, it's not the deepest forward group you've ever seen, but there are guys who have done it in this league that aren't doing it right here, right now. Conor Bedard is still this team's leading scorer, and he hasn't had a consistent line mate all season long. The Blackhawks haven't done anything consistently. And yeah, some of the frustration is because he's not finding the back of the net, and we want him to be better in those areas. But he's not getting any help whatsoever right now. And again, I mentioned him just being circled by opposing teams. There just needs to be a little bit more patience around Conor Bedard. I understand the frustrations with Luke Richardson and the offense struggling, and they certainly need to be better there. And the lack of having answers is, I think, kind of the most concerning part right here, right now. But Conor Bedard is going to be absolutely fine. And I know people wanted to see him go and put up video game numbers like we saw Sidney Crosby do in his second year in the NHL. And believe me, I think Conor Bedard is still going to be an unbelievable player. But clearly the Blackhawks need to do a better job of getting him some more help. And I quite honestly think they just need to come up with some better offensive game plans, which I don't think is possible right here, right now, under the scheme they're at. But again, we're in a long-term rebuild, and this is just another one of those filler years that unfortunately hasn't gone as well as we thought could have with some of the pieces they brought in this offseason.
Yeah, and then you're thinking like last year, there was possibly some hope of Lucas Reichel being at least a short-term second line center, and then being shifted down to fourth as of right now, from what I'm seeing on Daily Faceoff. I mean, that was one of the few picks that was from the previous regime. I mean, I spoke even on my show even about some of the missteps of Stan Bowman, from Kirby Dach, Artemi Panarin, Adam Boqvist, and everything. And just they're still feeling kind of the effects from the previous regime, even though this one is new for them. But hey, they hit on Alex Vlasic at least. He's been at least for them pretty great, even though he has a different defense partner right now in Connor Murphy. But it's still crazy to think the differences between the goals against, power play percentage, PK, and then you see goals for, the biggest difference for them. It's just you hope that hopefully those guys can help Conor Bedard get in on the scoring outside of Ryan Donato. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss more about game predictions and possibly where these two teams could be once these two teams meet up again in February. We're going to discuss that more on this crossover edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Chicago Blackhawks.
But first, real quick, I got to talk to you all about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. And Prize Picks is now the easiest and most exciting way for you to play daily fantasy sports, because all you got to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Do you think Conor Bedard's going to break his goal drought and get more than 0.5 goals in this meeting against the Florida Panthers? Or how about Bedard to go nuts on home ice and record more than 1.5 points? You and your friends can now cook up hot takes and win real money this hockey season when you run your game with Prize Picks. And one thing that I really do enjoy about Prize Picks is it's the only real daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so that your lineups stay in play even if a player were to get injured. So be sure to go and download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $50 instantly when you play $5. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps with Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, segment 3, Mondo, before we wrap things up on today's crossover episode of Locked On Blackhawks and Locked On Panthers, thought it would be fun to get into a little bit of a game prediction here, which I know to some listeners, you're thinking about the Blackhawks dead last in the NHL standings, the Florida Panthers off to a tremendous start as defending champs. This game prediction won't be a lot of fun. It seems pretty obvious, right? Well, in fact, Mondo, the Panthers have won 6 of the last 8 meetings. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to call a spade, but they have dropped each of the last 2 games in which they traveled to Chicago and played at the United Center. So I'm curious, you've mentioned that Florida's kind of had some stumbles here as of late. Do you think they find a way to get back into the W column in this matchup against the lowly Blackhawks on Thursday night?
I feel like yes, because it's not only it's just not only being on a little bit of a rough stretch, but just the fact that they're healthier. I mean, it's so crazy. The recent history at the United Center, it's in their last 7 matchups, 2 losses in a row, 3 wins in a row, 2 losses in a row. But then, funny enough, at home, it's 7 wins in a row for the Panthers.
We don't got to talk about that. We didn't have to talk about that on today's episode.
But hey, we don't have to worry about that until February 1st. But for the Panthers, I do think this for them, they'll get back into their winning ways, and thankfully for them, it's an opportunity after falling behind in Winnipeg. It's a little fresh in their minds, but also they know that they played well enough in stretches to at least make it a game against the best team in the NHL, and then saying, okay, you brush that off. You know that you can compete, and then you know that what's on the other side. Hopefully, it's not a trap game for them, but I think that the Panthers will come out with a win. Which, by the way, this game will be on ESPN Plus with the broadcast crew of Mike Monaco, Ray Ferraro, and Emily Kaplan from the Madhouse on Madison. So hopefully the national audience will be entertained to a good one with Conor Bard against the defending Stanley Cup champions. They love circling the young phenom against the high profile teams as right now the Florida Panthers are the defending champs.
Oh, absolutely. Got to cash in on that marketing. I agree, though, Mondo. I do think Florida is going to come away with 2 points here, even though they've struggled in this building the last couple of trips they've made here. Ultimately, the Blackhawks going up against this caliber of a team without Seth Jones. I mentioned their record over the last couple of years without Seth Jones hasn't been very good. Alec Martinez has really struggled since returning from a groin injury a couple of weeks ago, and that's really left a lot of the defensive responsibility on poor Alex Vlasic's shoulders, who, as you referenced in segment 2, has been one of the silver linings for the Chicago Blackhawks, and firmly believe he's going to become a household name type of defenseman because the kid is that good. But yeah. I agree. I think the Panthers are going to come away with a win. They're the healthier team, as you referenced, and also I think if they score 3 goals, which is very much in their arsenal with the offensive depth that they have, I don't know if the Blackhawks can match them. When's the last time the Blackhawks scored 3 goals? I couldn't even tell you. It's been a couple of weeks, Mondo. It has been a brutal offensive stretch. So I do think the Blackhawks have the capability of keeping this game close. The weird part is if you go and look at their results so far this year, they really haven't been blown out. Like, I would say at least 17, maybe even 18 of their 19 games that they've played this year have still been up for grabs in the third period. So it's not like this team has been truly dead last in the NHL standings, haven't been close to their competition. No, they've played a lot of competitive games. They've just lacked the offensive firepower to get it done. And when you average, 2.33 goals per game like they do, worst in the NHL, it forces your defense in goaltending to be so perfect. I just don't think that's a recipe for success against this Florida Panthers team. So unfortunately, I do see this Blackhawks losing skid extending to 4 games when the defending Stanley Cup champions come to town tomorrow night. Last little thing to talk about here before we tie a bow on today's crossover episode, Mondo. Where do you think this Florida Panthers team is going to be when these two teams meet again for the final time this year on February 1st? And as a side question of that, as a team that's likely to be in the mix atop the NHL standings for the Stanley Cup playoffs this year, we're starting to, we're not there yet, but we're starting to get inklings and ideas of what this team looks like now that we're 19 games into the year. It's a pretty good sample size. I'm curious not only what you think this team will look like on February 1st, but what do you think they'll possibly be looking at as a team that could be active at the trade deadline?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, probably another depth defenseman, maybe a forward for their bottom 6. Hey, maybe they'll take Taylor Hall at 25% of his salary. Maybe, who knows? And hey, that next matchup will be a nationally televised game on a Saturday after bowl season's over and the NFL playoffs are mostly done. So another nationally televised game for them. So I think they're going to be looking for them. And right now, the Panthers are 1 point behind the Toronto Maple Leafs, who won 6 of 7 without Austin Matthews. So impressive what they've been able to do. So I think they'll still be challenging for the top spot in the Atlantic Division. Which, hey, the Chicago Blackhawks, you said they've been in these close games, one goal games a lot. I'm seeing the last time that they scored 3 was against the LA Kings on November 2nd. So, but still, these games for the Blackhawks, it's a little bit of a sign of growth for them and still playing these tight games, even though if they're coming on the losing end. So even though it might be 0 points out of 2, there could still be a little bit of growth for them. And hey, they're going to be in the Winter Classic, so that's also a nice showcase. Which Frank Saravelli today said that he'd like to see Lone Depot Park in Little Havana have the Marlins host the Panthers for a Winter Classic game. So that's another thing of hopefully that what's coming in the Panthers' future.
Wouldn't that be something? As far as where I think this Blackhawks team will be on February 1st, it's tough to say because they are capable defensively, and they've got an outstanding goaltending from both Peter Mrazek and Arvid Soderblom. Part of me wants to say they're due for positive regression offensively because they do have capable players, certainly more talented than what they had in their forward group last year. So I do feel like there's some positive regression coming, but ultimately I still expect the Blackhawks to be in the bottom 5 of the standings. I referenced we're now 19 games into the year. We got a good sample size. Everyone always talks about that Thanksgiving date in the NHL in terms of teams kind of understanding what they have, and maybe if they need to make a move, that's when they kind of figure it out. We know what this Blackhawks team is, which is they're a team that can play hard. Luke Richardson is a good defensive-minded coach, and the Blackhawks have capable defenders. So I think they're going to be able to keep a lot of games close, but they just lack that offensive firepower that's really going to get them over the edge. I do think what will be interesting come February 1st, and quite honestly, even sooner than that, possibly, Mondo, is a couple of prospects coming up to the NHL level, given that they just need some more speed and some offensive firepower. You mentioned Lucas Reichel earlier down on the 4th line. That's one of the wacky things that Luke Richardson is doing right now. Lucas Reichel should be in the top 6. But another guy who I'd like to see in the top 6 that's down in Rockford right now, Frank Nazar, 13th overall draft pick in 2022. He's over a point per game for Rockford right now. I think there's also a possibility that Colton Dock, younger brother of Kirby Dock, of course, could be coming up to the show as well. So I think that's kind of going to be the intrigue around this Blackhawks team at that point in time is, will they be giving some youngsters an opportunity, and how do they look? But sadly, it's going to be another year out of contention for this Blackhawks team, but will make it enticing come the trade deadline, as they could have players like Taylor Hall, as you mentioned, Ryan Donato, who's the team's best goal scorer all of a sudden, Alec Martinez possibly on the back end as well. There's going to be a lot of players that could potentially be on the move for the Blackhawks. So even though these two franchises are in two completely different spots at this point in time, going to be fun to keep up with them throughout the course of the season. Going to be fun to watch this matchup at the United Center on Thursday night, Mondo. Really enjoy you taking the time to have a chat with me. I know it's late for you out on the East Coast, but really appreciate you, man. Go and let my Blackhawks listeners know where they can find you to keep up with the defending Stanley Cup champs.
They can follow me on X at Monoman12 and on Blue Sky at Monoman12. They can follow the show account on X at LO_FLA Panthers, as well as Instagram at LOFLA Panthers on Blue Sky, no underscore on that one. So they can follow me there. How about you, my friend?
I very much doubt there are any Florida Panthers fans out there that want to go back to the days of a dire rebuild. But if there are some out there, you can find me on X at Jack Bushman too. You can of course find Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may listen to your podcast, and you can check out the show's page on Instagram and on X at capital L, capital O Blackhawks. Thank you all again to everyone who tuned in to this crossover episode of Locked On Blackhawks and Locked On Panthers. Mondo, best of luck tomorrow night at the UC. Thanks again for joining me. We'll see you next time on the next episode of Locked On Blackhawks and Locked On Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.